So, as part of this extended format of the World Cup, like we said, 9 African teams were guaranteed a spot. There were 9 qualifying groups, and the 9 group winners are through to the World Cup. There's a potential 10th spot, and this 10th spot is going to a team that is chosen from a continental playoff. But how do you make it to the continental playoff? Well, of those 9 groups I spoke about, the 4 best second-placed teams played in a round-robin tournament this November, actually like last week here. And those 4 teams were DRC, Nigeria, Gabon, and Cameroon. Okay. So those 4 teams, the winner of that tournament is not through to the World Cup per se, of that mini tournament. They will go on to play other countries from other continents, from other confederations. So I think Ireland is one nation that's also had its own heroics that will be through to the playoffs, that I think potentially the Congo will have to play to qualify. Maybe a couple other teams as well. I'm not too sure about that part. But in any case, they are through to the playoffs. That will be settled in March. In time for the World Cup that summer. So how did that mini tournament play out? Gabon came in, they had played valiantly, and actually this match between Gabon and Nigeria was 0-0 until the 78th minute when Nigeria scored. Then in the 89th minute, Gabon equalized, and it went to playoffs, and I think it just unraveled for them with the great Victor Osimhen of Nigeria scoring twice. Nigeria won 4-1. In the other game, DRC versus Cameroon, the mighty Cameroon was defeated 1-0. So DRC was through to the finals against Nigeria, where they also ended up winning in that game. It went to penalties. And DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Dr. Congo, as some people like to pronounce it, ended up winning that in penalty shootouts. So they're through to the playoffs. We hope they make it to the World Cup. They've been there one time in 1974. And you also hear that story here. That's the story I'm telling here. And it's the one albatross, because this is the story of a team that might not eventually make it to the World Cup. But here it is anyway. The Democratic Republic of Congo and their history at the World Cup. 1. Zaire, right, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Zaire, who were the African champions at the time, end up qualifying, and they qualified comfortably, and this is important, scoring 18 goals and conceding 5 on their route to qualification. So, for the 1974 World Cup, Zaire is placed in Group 2 alongside Brazil and Scotland and Yugoslavia, right? Those 3 countries. And they play against Scotland, which at the time was a powerhouse, a firebrand team with the likes of Kenny Douglas, right? Dennis Law, this sort of big hitters. And Zaire lost 2-0 to this great team. Incredible, right? It's not a win, but they played very well. In fact, the Scottish centre half Jim Houghton said after the match, "Let's face it, we underestimated them. For 15 minutes, I wondered what the hell was going on. Where the devil had this lot come from, playing stuff like that." I wish I'd put on my Scottish accent there, but I don't really know where to start with that. So what am I saying here? Zaire, they give a decent showing against one of the better teams in the world. Their next opponents, however, they played against Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia was onto them, right? Yugoslavia was onto them. Before that match had happened, and after the Scottish match, a dispute about match payments broke out among the Zairean players, with many players believing that the officials from their country had taken the money, right? Some of the uglier parts of African football that we're still contending with today. Chaos broke out among the squad, and they were eventually each given 3,000 Deutschmarks by FIFA. FIFA had to come in to bail them out, which convinced them to play, because FIFA, they couldn't risk spoiling their reputation with teams sort of storming out of the World Cup mid-tournament. So, what happened in that game? The Yugoslavia team was not supposed to be better than the Scottish team. And the Scottish team, remember, had beaten Zaire 2-0. So what happens here? Within 20 minutes, Yugoslavia was up 3-0. Then things took a turn for the worse when their first choice goalkeeper, Kazai Mwamba, was replaced by Tubilandu Ndimbi, who was only 5'4", who was a friend of one of the Zaire officials. And the official was in attendance and wanted to see him play. Short dude, right? 5'4" at the World Cup as a reserve goalie. Come on now. I'm not being high-test here, but you know. And the team goes on to lose not 4-0, not 5-0, but 9-0. Now, Zaire at this point is under the rule of Mobutu Sese Seko, right? One of the worst dictators known to African rule. And I know some other dictators, people debate their legacies, but I think Mobutu is one of those guys that universally nobody likes. So Mobutu was furious here. He had done a whole big thing before they went there to celebrate them, had them over at the royal palace and so forth. He was furious. Such was his anger, Mobutu's anger, that he ordered several of his personal bodyguards to go to Germany where the World Cup was and threaten the national team. They did, telling their squad that if they lost by more than 3 goals to reigning world champions Brazil in the last game, they would not be allowed back into the country. So allegedly. So now we come to the second half of the second game, of the final game, against Brazil, and Zaire and Brazil are leading 2-0. Not quite the landslide it was against Yugoslavia, but it's 2-0. And the players are starting to panic, right? They're fearing for their life. They've been told they can't go back home. Now Brazil was lining up around the 75th minute, right? They're lining up for a free kick, and one of the most wildest World Cup moments happens. I'll put it on your screen here, where they're lining up for a free kick. Brazil comes, and a player, Ilunga from the Congo, from Zaire, just steps out of line and boosts the ball when it's supposed to be Brazil's free kick, right? What just happened here? Does this guy Mwepu Ilunga not know the rules, right? He receives a yellow card for interfering with a free kick, and ultimately the game ended up 3-0. Now, that thing about Mobutu Sese Seko saying you can't come back unless you concede 3 is disputed. In other places it says 4, which seems to be true because they ended up being able to come back home. So what happened here? A lot of people immediately believe that this African guy did not know, this Zairean guy did not know the rules, and that's why he kicked the ball, you know. But think about this. 24 African countries tried to had entered the qualification, and they had made it, scoring 18 goals, conceding only 5. They had beaten Morocco, who had been at the last World Cup and fared very well. How would they not know the rules, right? What are we actually saying here when we suggest that this guy Mwepu Ilunga did not know that when it's a free kick, you don't kick it out yourself, right? Clearly, what people did not know was this backstory that I gave you, which tells us that there was some other stuff going on here. He was frustrated. They were nervous. He was trying to stall for time. That's why he kicked the ball. Here's a quote from a publication. I'll put the link in the description. And I quote, "However, Ilunga will always be remembered for the moment in the final group stage match when he sprang out of the defensive wall at a Brazil free kick and booted the ball down the pitch. Universally ridiculed ever since, his apparent rush of blood was actually intended as a protest against the decision of President Joseph Mobutu, or Mobutu Sese Seko, not to pay the players as well as threatening them," right? And I quote him here, "I did that deliberately," Ilunga said in an interview in 2010. "I was aware of the football regulations. I did not have a reason to continue getting injured while those who will benefit financially were sitting on the terraces watching. I know the rules very well, but the referee was quite lenient and only gave me a yellow card," right? So thus Zaire left the World Cup with no points, having conceded 14 goals in their 3 matches. And also this ended sort of like the golden period in which they had been crowned African champions in 1968 and 1974. So this is a very dear point in African history, in African World Cup history to me, because it was one of those things where it was used to placate or to play into the racialized stereotypes of Africans not knowing what's going on even when they are part of the process, when clearly something else was going on here. There's some other African decadence, of course, we can talk about, with the officials taking the money and Mobutu Sese Seko's tyranny. But Mwepu Ilunga not knowing the rules is not one of those things.